Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Adi, and today we have another Indianapolis team report with another top player. We have Austin Acosta. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's great to have you on the channel. But for those who don't know you, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name's Austin Acosta. I go by Roller Coaster Online. I'm a relatively newer player. I kind of popped up a lot in the online stuff. I just am now kind of starting to be able to do in-person stuff, and I'm hoping that I can like kind of do well as a player.
Yeah, and you certainly made a splash at first, second tournament. I'm not sure which one. If you went to Salt Lake.
This is my second regional, but the first regional before that was Dallas in 2020.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely made a splash. You get all the way to top four at Indianapolis Regionals with this team. So do you want to talk me through how you went about building this team?
Well, it probably looks super familiar to you because this is a modified version of your Player Cups 3 team. And I think I kind of was asking myself the same questions that everyone was asking themselves whenever we found out that it was going to actually be a double restricted format, which was okay, what of those single restricted teams can benefit from having a second Pokemon on it. And you had all those like torn ogre teams that just added Zacians over things like Kartana or Landorus or Regieleki. And then you had like the original like hot dog teams, which were the Sun teams that had Zacian, and people were just taking Torkoal off and putting Groudon instead and making more adjustments past that. You had Calyrex teams that added Zacian to it. And for me, I played your Players Cup 3 team a lot, and I really, really liked it. It was honestly one of the kind of like, to me, it felt like a team that just synergized so perfectly with each other. Like everything felt very specific. It didn't really feel like you could change too much, and it all felt really strong. So that was something that I wanted to use. And my first attempt was with Xerneas, and it did not work very well at all. I was a little sad about that because I really wanted to see Xerneas be good again. And I think other people kind of like saw the like core of Charizard, Screens, and Incineroar and Groudon and like added Zacian and Groudon. I kept the Venusaur and added Calyrex, which I felt really, really strong.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. You still have all the components that Rinja Sun does defensively, except you don't have the Zacian, of course. Instead, Caloric Shadow, I think, gives you some other options just to clean up games. Um, But do you want to talk about the individual Pokemon, their movesets, EV spreads, and what they do?
Yeah, yeah. I guess we'll start with just kind of like Groudon, just because it like these are I think for Groudon, Venusaur, Charizard, and Grim, they are the same sets from that PC3 team. Just because like all the things that they survived felt really well. So Groudon, really good, lots of special defense, can take geysers behind screens, can take origin pulses if it's at full health, if it has the screen up. It has a lot of speed investment, which allows it to outspeed things like Zacian at +1. You can't really outspeed Calyrex at +1 unless you're just going crazy fast. It can, I think it's like a 3-hit KO for Behemoth Blade if a Reflect is up and with the Citrus Berry. Um, if the Charizard isn't Life Orb, it can actually take Wildfires behind screen and be able to strike back and kill. Especially if you decide to max it, you can live pretty comfortably. And I'm trying to think of anything else. Like basically, the sets are it's the original standard set: Rock Slide, Sword Stance, Precipice Blades, Protect. Rock Slide to hit stuff like Thundurus and Charizard. Precipice Blades because it's such an insane move and it's really strong. Sword Stance to like deal with any kind of intimidate and also pressure people just trying to leave it alone, which actually came in really big at this tournament because a lot of people are used to playing AV Groudon because of how popular that got. So there are a lot of times when people would just leave my Groudon alone after they got Intimidate on it because it's just like, oh, it's a -1, it's fine, I can ignore it, but then I'd be able to Sword Stance, and now it's like a really big problem all over again. And then Protect just because I
Mhm.
like to play defensively.
And did you ever consider running an assault vest on Groudon? How do you feel about the strengths and weaknesses of those two sets?
I like Assault Vest Groudon a lot. I feel like it's strong in a lot of ways. For me personally, I like being able to Swords Dance. I don't really max the Groudon a lot, which I think is where the Assault Vest comes in big. And Charizard having an Assault Vest for like the way that the meta's changed a lot really throws a lot of people off. So I felt more comfortable with everything where it was. I did consider it, but like when I kind of like tried the other stuff, like I did obviously try Renya's Sun. This just felt a lot better.
Makes sense. I always been a big fan of Citrus Groudon as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just so valuable, I think, when you have to play this positioning sort of game. But
Mhm.
Assault Vest obviously also really popular and a really strong set. But tell me about the Charizard. You're running an Assault Vest on it, which is not one of the more common items at the moment, but obviously was used back in Series 8. And I think I used it at the very beginning of Series 11, or sorry, Series 12, excuse me.
Yeah.
But, people tend to run Life Orb, Chardy, something else on it.
Yeah. So Life Orb and Chardy are definitely like the most common things. I actually think that like I heard people talk about they were running into a lot of Wakanberry Charizards too. Um, but the AV really throws people off because one, not a lot of people are thinking about it. Like it's not common. I'm pretty sure I was the only person with an AV Charizard at that tournament. So it throws a lot of people off because one, whenever people lead Calyrex and just try to get like big Astro Barrages off into me, it doesn't do anything. It makes the Yveltal matchup really good because obviously Calyrex does horribly into Yveltal, but when you have an Assault Vest Charizard plus Light Screen Grimmsnarl, that Yveltal is way less threatening, and you're able to kind of like match it blow for blow and stall out the Dynamax with it. And when you have stuff like Wildfire Chip doing a lot of damage to it, it just becomes a lot less scary. The other thing is that like this Charizard actually can survive a full power water spout in the rain. I definitely, if you have a screen up, I think it lives at 2 if it's just like regular. Definitely depending on how offensive the Kyogre is. So it makes it so that like obviously Kyogre's Icean is a really popular core. It was like the most used team in that top cut. So it gives you an option of leading Charizard into Kyogre's Zacian, especially when you think that they're going to lead the Zacian, because now your Charizard isn't as scared of just dying immediately. The other thing is that like you can match blow for blow with other Charizards, and like other Charizards, so most Charizards are running Ancient Power right now to deal with Charizard. The thing is, like with Light Screen and the ability to get Quake boosts on it, I can take more than one, and no other Charizard can do that. Once the Chardy Berry's gone, it's just like it's gonna get hit by the rocks and it's gonna die. So the sets on it are Heat Wave, Air Slash, Scorching Sands, and Ancient Power. Heat Wave just because I'm not as offensive with this Charizard, Blast Burn doesn't get the KOs, which means that when I'm out of max, I'm in a lot of trouble. Like other Charizards, you can Blast Burn Groudons, and it just does so much damage because they're fully offensive, even if they're running Chardy Berry, and especially if they're running Life Orb. But because I don't have full investment in special attack, I'm not getting those KOs, so it's not worth it for me to be like recharging for a turn. Air Slash for consistency, and Airstream's obviously like the most powerful move in Dynamax format. That's been the case ever since Sword and Shield this whole time. I don't want to hit hurricanes in the sunlight, so I'm sticking with Air Slash. No one can change my mind about that. Scorching Sands, really good ground move. Great for breaking Sugar Berries on Ensign. Great for getting even further special defense boost so that Yveltal, Kyogre, and Calyrex are having an even harder time hitting you, and they're very confused the whole time. And then Ancient Power to deal with the opposing Charizards. And if you're really lucky, getting all those Ancient Power boosts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty standard AV Charizard set. Not that I can really call any set standard, but yeah. Did you ever consider any other moves? I know you touched on Blast Burn and Hurricane.
Yeah, Blast Burn and Hurricane were like the two main ones I was thinking about. So the original version I was thinking about, because I've used And this was way back in like Series 5. I can't remember the name, but a Korean player who was the first person to really like popularize or like make a very successful, very scary. It was that original like Charizard, Venusaur, Torkoal, Dusclops, and Tyranitar Sun team. And that team had Heat Wave and Blast Burn. So you had the full power Gmax Wildfire of Blast Burn, but when you were out of max, you had Heat Wave so that you could just consistently attack. And I considered taking off either Scorching Sand or Ancient Power to run double fire moves on it for that specific scenario. But at the end of the day, the Quake boosts were so valuable and the Charizards were becoming so prevalent, having your own Ancient Power was just kind of mandatory.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you want to talk me through some of the other Pokemon on the team?
Yeah. Let's go to Venusaur. Again, it's pretty standard set for this format. Sleep Powder, Leaf Storm, Weather Ball, Earth Power. It's bulky enough to survive Behemoth Blade behind screens. It takes 2 airstreams from like Landorus and Thundurus, especially if they're not very offensive. Behind Reflex, you're able to retaliate back by getting your Weakness Policy proc and getting huge Vine Lashes off, or max Flares, max Geysers if Kyogre sets them off. Earth Power to increase your own special defense to make it harder for, again, those same big special attackers, Yveltal, Calyrex, and Kyogre, to have more of an issue with the Venusaur. And the other thing is that in case weather is not an option of setting up, you do have the ability to slow down Zacian and just hit it with an Earth Power. So you're not completely lost against those and you don't have to rely on Sleep Powders. Timid, max speed, because you need to always be able to hit before +1 Thundurus. That's a really big thing. Like being able to get that extra hit off is really, really important. Unfortunately, there's no way for Venusaur to ever outspeed +1 Calyrex or +1 Zacian. So if those get speed boosts, it becomes pretty problematic. But as long as you're managing everything well, it should be fine. I will say, I had taken off Weather Ball because Weather Ball was originally on there in Series 8 to deal with Kartana, because Kartana was very, very popular, especially on like Kyogre teams. But Kartana, it showed up at Salt Lake City, but I didn't see any this weekend. I haven't even really seen Kartana in like months on the ladder, so it wasn't as much of a thing. We did switch to Weather Ball. It was originally Sludge Bomb, and I kind of wish that I kept it that way, just because getting the Ooze Boost onto Calyrex is devastating. If you're able to position that, it's really hard for your opponent to come back. And then the other thing is that I just was never really confident in the damage output of it, so I never really clicked it. I know that if I don't have a boost, I'm not KOing his Zacian, but it just like, it never felt good to click. The only time I really went for it was like into Zapdos a couple of times, just because I had no other way of hitting it decently.
Right, and Sludge Bomb also hits it pretty hard, so it's not even like you're really losing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I kind of like, in hindsight, I really wish I had gone with Sludge Bomb, but like when you're getting ready for everything the day before, you're just like making all these decisions, and like I don't think that Weather Ball was like the worst choice, but I definitely think they could have kind of flowed together a bit better.
I can see that. This Venusaur, obviously timid, you're not max special attack. You're really reliant on that weakness policy getting procced if you want to do damage, or you're setting up that Vine Lash, which is so much residual damage. But having other ways to boost your attack is definitely really valuable on this sort of set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I guess I'll go into like the two major support pieces before I go into like the thing that I really that was like kind of really unique for this team. Not that it's like that crazy of a set, but Grimmsnarl, it's very weak on the physically defensive side because the only thing that really hits it physically is Zacian, and there's no real point in my eyes like EVing yourself to live Behemoth Blade. You can do there are a lot of Grimmsnarl sets that have the physical defense to survive like neutral Behemoth Blade behind screens, but for me that's just like way too much setup, and I never really do Grimmsnarl in Sin leads anyway, so it just didn't seem worth it. I was more EV to live stuff from Kyogre, like if I get a special defense boost on the Grimmsnarl and a light screen, like getting a single target max geyser off of Water Spout, I live handily. So, and that was pretty huge. It can also like go up against Calorexes and Yvetals really, really well for these same reasons. It's like a pretty standard set of Spirit Break, Reflect, and Light Screen. I have Scary Face instead of Thunderwave just because Landorus and Thunderous, if they are able to outspeed you, are very problematic for this team. So it needs Scary Face to be able to outpace those two Mons. And, you know, who doesn't like clicking Thunderwave and getting a full turn paralysis? But Alecki, Thunderous, and Landorus are so problematic for this team after they outpace you that you really just like can't afford to run anything else. And also, additionally, like no one's really running anything with Clear Body. No one's using Metagross. No one's using Dragapult. There's Solgaleo and Full Metal Body, but I never thought that this team struggled with Solgaleo. It doesn't really do anything to increase its speed against you unless it has Tailwind, and you just stall that out anyway. So, and also if there's a Solgaleo and I set up a Reflect, it's going to die through Max Steel Spike anyway, so I'd never have a chance to get a Thunder Wave off onto it anyway. And then for Ensign, this is a different Ensign than what you all had. It's a lot more physically bulky, and y'all had max speed Ensign, which was a good call for that tournament, but also I don't think that I needed it for this one. It's a lot slower. This is actually one of the slowest Ensigns that I've ever run. I usually go around like 92 speed. But it's got a lot of defense. It can live -1 quakes from Calyrex Ice. It can take a few. It can live Sacred Sword and Airstream from neutral Zacian and +1 Thunderous behind Reflect. In case you ever want to go with that Grimmsnarl instant lead. And it's just weaker on the special defensive side because I have 3 max quake options. Like, so it's very easy for it to get special defense. You know, standard set, Flare Blitz, Fake Out, Taunt, Parting Shot. I originally had Dark Move, like Darkest Lariat, but I wasn't really clicking that much because I have my own Calyrex. So if I'm relying on Ensign to take out the Calyrex, I'm kind of in trouble anyway. Like with my Assault, if my Assault Vest Charizard isn't dealing with it, if my own Calyrex isn't dealing with, I'm kind of in a lot of trouble. So I just was never really clicking it that much. I tried doing Burning Jealousy, but with a really fast Will-O-Wisp on Calyrex, I again just wasn't clicking it that much. And then I was like, okay, well, I'll just go with Taunt because Porygon 2 can be kind of annoying. And then the other thing was that like so many Mimikyus stopped running Mental Herb that it allowed me to deny Trick Room setups from Mimirex teams.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think this is sort of the Taunt is probably the most common move once you drop the Dark move, and your team seems like it doesn't need it. So
yeah. And then so like now it's kind of like what made it a double restricted team, Calyrex Shadow. I think that Calyrex Shadow and Groudon are just a really powerful combination in general. You know, in like Ultra Series, Lunadon was really, really strong. And I think that kind of like the general concept, and obviously this isn't something like a hard rule that people need to stick to, but having a good physical attacking restricted and a good special attacking restricted is just a really, really good duo. Those Zacian Calyrex teams are just a bit too hyper offensive for me. This one's a lot more position based. But once I was like, oh, let me do this, it's really, really strong. And it was actually something that I was just like joking with a friend with because I was trying to make Xerneas work on this team. And I was like, I really like this team and I'm just trying to figure out the right restricted on there. And I was like, oh, maybe I should run like Sash, Trick Room, Calyrex because there was a Porygon here originally. And he was like, bro, that actually sounds terrifying. And I was like, wait. And so I did Sash, Calyrex, and it was originally Trick Room on this team. But which was really good for like setting up in games whenever your opponent started to outpace you and you had no way of denying their speed boosts. Like if Grimmsnarl was dead and they were getting Airstream boosts on to Thundurus, people weren't always prepared for Trick Room, so they would just leave the Calyrex alone and not double into it, and I'd be able to set up a Trick Room and like reverse sweep from there. But it became harder and harder to get that set up, and leads like Thundurus and Zacian could be problematic enough to where I was like, well, if I just have Will-O-Wisp and I burn the Thundurus and I Wildfire the Zacian, it's kind of just over. Like there's nothing threatening me anymore, and I could even just like lose my Calyrex at that point, and it's totally fine. um, Astro Barrage because it's an insanely broken move. It's insane. It hits. I was telling a friend about this, and he was like, "Oh yeah, what's Astro Barrage? Like 80 base power?" And I'm like, "No, that is 120 for some reason, and it does not miss, and it's a ghost move." Um, so it's a really great move. And then the thing that like when I started like using, because it was originally just like Astro Barrage, Expanding Force, Trick Room, and Protect. I was noticing it was when AV Kyogre was becoming really popular and also Calm Mind Kyogre. And I was like, okay, well, I need Psyshock, so I just don't automatically lose to these things. And the second I started running Psyshock, it just made everything kind of work together perfectly, because there are those times when people get the Quake boost or their light screen set up, and then you can just kind of throw them for a loop and hit them on the physical side. You get the 1 KO, and Calyrex really just needs 1 KO and maybe just a little bit of Vine Lash or Wildfire Trip, and everything's in range, and it's like just so hard to stop at that point.
Hmm. Yeah, like you said, probably the scariest restricted, especially for a team that was originally built around Xerneas. It sort of is just a better Xerneas, right? You just don't need to click Geomancy, but you do the same things. You're just
Yeah.
faster than everything. You have this stupid special attack boosting ability, anyways. Um, and yeah, I mean, it fits really well with this core. We've seen Calyrex Shadow Groudon do well in the past, but this team is a really cool take on that, where you do get to play a little more defensively, get to take advantage of that Fine Lash, and then really set up for these Calyrex Shadow end games, or use the Calyrex Shadow in the early game to chip things down, to burn things, and then kind of control the game with your other defensive tools. So yeah, just a really, really solid team that worked really well. Do you want to talk me through how you approach some of the teams that you expected to face?
Yeah, I'd say that, like the first biggest team that I had to be prepared for was Kyogre Zacian. It's so common. Kyogre does really well into Groudon, so you really can't just not have a game plan against it. And the general flowchart for that is always kind of lead Grimmsnarl, Venusaur. If they lead Kyogre, then you can just go ahead and max, set up a light screen. My turn one play is always Quake and Light Screen, so that I get a special defense boost to make sure that my Grimmsnarl lives everything. And also because like a lot of people don't always leave their Kyogre to just like die to vines turn one. So it covers for them bringing in like their own Zacian and trying to take a Vine Lash or something like that, and it works out really well. And then just from there, you just chip everything down, set up your other screen whenever you get the chance, and um, if they choose to max something like Kyogre, you're in a totally fine position because they've given up their speed control. They have no way of outpacing you, especially if you take out a Grimmsnarl or anything like that. Then Groudon and Kyogre are not Kyogre. Groudon and Calyrex are sitting comfortably in the back, ready to come in and deal with anything. And if you have the sun up, you know that they're going to pivot out to try to get the rain back up. You can set up a Sword Stance and just start spamming Astro Barrage, and they really can't do anything. The thing that was always nice was that going for Astral Barrages prevented them from water spouting, so Groudon would always live, because they would just take way too much damage. Then the other possible outcome is that they would lead Zacian Grimmsnarl or Zacian Incineroar. That would always get a little bit tricky. Normally, if it was like Zacian Incineroar, I would like play it safe and I would like set a Reflect and get my Groudon in. Just because that kind of like would set me up in a positive way later, and then I could get my Calyrex in later. Will-O-Wisp the Zacian, it's less of a problem. Quake the Incineroar because Unnerved turns off Shuka Berry, which became a very common item leading up to this tournament, and just basically didn't exist to me the entire tournament. And then get your special defense boost so that you can deal with Kyogre later. And then also, Kyogre just has a hard time dealing with Venusaur, even if it's not max, because Kyogre hits impossibly strong, but that's because it's like stab, sometimes Mystic Water, 150 base power water move coming at you, boosted by the rain. So Hailstorm just does way less. It's not nearly as scary. There's like 3 other boosters that are just completely removed from it that make it way less scary. So Venusaur like deals with it very well, especially if you can get a Sleep Powder onto it. That was kind of like the biggest matchup that I had like prepared for, just because it's a very position heavy game and you always kind of need to like, there's a lot of options that both players have, and it's not so much as making a like solid flow chart of like, do this, 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 and this, and then it's impossible for you to win. It's like, okay, do this. What happened? This. Okay, now here are your options, and kind of going from there. So I felt really comfortable with it, even though I did lose to it. Then the other matchups were Yveltal Zacian, which became very popular. Those were also kind of similar of like lead Grimmsnarl, Venusaur, get a Quake. You could also lead, like Charizard. It was always like lead Venusaur at first because people are afraid of Charizard, so they don't want to lead the Zacian into it. And then once I kind of like lulled my opponents into a false sense of security, then I was able to come with the Charizard, and they're not prepared for it to be Assault Vest, so it's doing their attacks are doing way less damage than they think it is. But it was like generally one of those 2+ Grimmsnarl, Venusaur game 1, Charizard game 2. And then actually, and usually what my game plan was, and this was like the things that I prepped for, was leading Grimmsnarl, Venusaur game 1 with Calyrex and Groudon in the back. And then game 2 was Grimmsnarl, Charizard game 1, Groudon, and Incineroar, and not even bringing the Calyrex, because it's kind of a thing of like, oh, well, he's bringing the Calyrex. I don't need this to like deal to like, because I'm not going to bring this because it's just Calyrex. And then like it's not there the second game. Renya Sun was also one that I prepped for, even though I didn't see it the entire tournament. I did not lose a single game practicing against Renya with this team, which was really nice, even though it's kind of like scary. It's always Charizard, Grimmsnarl. If they lead Incin Charizard, you can just switch in your Groudon and go to a Rockfall. If it's the Life Orb variant, the Charizard's gone immediately. If it's the Charty Berry, you've weakened it. You've taken the sun away from them, so your own Groudon can take moves better. So now the next turn you can just Airstream and Rock Slide and do things like that. It was also really nice because there are always the Iron Ball variants of Renya that would try to trick the Charty Berry or what they thought was a Charty Berry or a Life Orb away from my Charizard and get an Assault Vest, and now their Grimmsnarl is useless. And if they led their own Grimmsnarl, set screens, match them turn for turn, chip when you can, and then slow Charizard down with Scary Faces and bring Calyrex in at the late game. Because a lot of those Renya Sun teams wouldn't even bring Zacian sometimes because of how poorly it does into opposing Sun. So it would just be like Grimmsnarl, Groudon, Charizard, and Incineroar. And then once I get a Swords Dance boost and get rid of their Charizard, it's really easy for Groudon to close out the game with Calyrex assistance. I played a lot of Trick Room matches with like Memorex. It was just Incin, Charizard. If it was the Kyogre variant, it was a little bit trickier because I was forced to bring Venusaur, which is really hard because you have Venusaur and Groudon and Calyrex, who isn't super physically bulky, that are just like very much in threat of Hailstorm after Hailstorm. But if you kind of like play slowly, just keep pivoting, keep rotating, don't let the Calyrex Ice come in for free. Always make sure you get a parting shot on it so that they feel they need to switch it out. And make sure you break the disguise and position yourself with Calyrex before Trick Room's over. Just get off that Alster Barrage and you're good to go. And I think those were kind of all the main matchups that I was like mentally prepared for. Or like that I kind of like seen common archetypes of, and like, okay, I know what to do for these things. I know how much damage these things usually do to me. I know how much damage I normally do in return.
Mm-hmm. I guess the other one that's probably worth talking about, you touched on it a little bit, is the Calyrex Shadow Mirror. Not necessarily Calyrex Shadow Groudon specifically, and obviously these teams vary tremendously, but did you have a general game plan into those teams?
Yeah, Calyrex Shadow, opposing Calyrex Shadow was actually one of like my most comfortable matchups because again, my Charizard is Assault Vest, so it was just lead Charizard, lead Grimmsnarl. They're very often paired with Thundurus, and Charizard lives non-Life Orb Max Lightning from Thundurus very easily. It has a chance to live Life Orb Max Lightning from Thundurus. So it was always just, if the Thundurus is led, reflect, set up Wildfire. Don't let the Thundurus gain too much speed because then you can just Scary Face it. And Thundurus is like such a weak Pokemon, but when it doesn't have Life Orb, when it doesn't have a Defiant boost, so it's actually not that scary giving it the boost, especially if it's at the cost of slowing it down. And once it's out of max, it's a non-issue anymore. It's not doing any damage. It's not fast enough. It won't live Astro Barrage. But the big thing was, and this was kind of always my game plan going into like anything, is try to delay the wildfire and vine lash as long as you possibly can so that you're shipping as many things as you can. And it was really big for the Calyrex games because once I got that set up and forced the Calyrex in, I got rid of their focus sashes without having to do anything, and I always still had mine. So it became, I don't need to win these speed ties anymore. Like, you can hit me, it doesn't matter. I'm the faster one. Your focus sash is gone. Take me down to 1. Nothing you have can hit me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It sounds like you were very well prepared going into this tournament. Really knew what you were knew how you were going to approach your matchups. Do you want to tell me a little bit about your tournament run and 1 or 2 notable games?
Yeah, I had a phenomenal run. I kind of went into the tournament just, it's unfortunate, but because of like work and life stuff, I think this is really going to be the only tournament that I'm going to be able to make it out to for 2022. I really wanted to make my push for Worlds, but it just kind of like wasn't feasible for me with like no locals or anything like that. Not that I disagree with the call to like not have locals. It's just kind of unfortunate for the position I was like starting when I did. I don't really think I can get the CP. So my mentality just going in here was just like, I'm going to meet all these nice people that I've met online. I'm going to let people know who I am, and I'm going to have fun, and I'm going to try my best to win every single game that I play. And it just kind of got to a point where I was like, I won my round 1 match. I won my round 2. I didn't take a loss until round 6. And I was like, this is a very real possibility for me. So the notable games that I wanted to talk about were getting to play. I mean, they're honestly, like towards the end, almost every single game was like noteworthy for me. Getting to play Andrew Ding, the former Collinsville regional championship, streamed round 1 of Top Cut was huge. Being able to like win the way that I did felt really good. And it was kind of like the exact game plan that I just kind of told you about for Kyogre. And me and my friend Chase Tiki, who helped me prep the night before, we were like, okay, if you can neutralize the Zacian by burning it, by slowing it down, by putting it to sleep, nothing stops Venusaur. So it was always like lead Grim, lead Venusaur. If Zacian doesn't show up, it's just good to go. And, I like, it just was one of those things of like, you prepped and it just went perfectly. And I knew a lot about his sets. I saw him on stream. I knew there was Life Orb Kyogre, so it's like, I know it's Water Spout, not Origin Pulse. So once the Kyogre's taken enough damage, spread damage is not an option for Andrew anymore. And it just allowed me to kind of like close the game out in a really dominant way in game 1. Whereas Kyogre's really low, his instant was on the field, and I was like, he's not just going to let me Astral Barrage kill it. So it did, like, on paper, it doesn't sound like a free turn of protecting your Calyrex and Swords Dancing with your Groudon in front of a Life Orb Kyogre. But because of like the board state and all the prep that I was able to do, I was like, this is the safest play in the world right now. Like, you can't really do anything to stop this without like doing something crazy. So it was just a game that was very much like I prepped for, and it just went perfectly. And I was like really excited about being able to win on stream in Top Cut. Some less fortunate games were I got to play Sohybe round 7, I think. No, it was round 8. I got to play Sohybe. Very nice person. I played them during Players Cup 4. We were talking a lot during the tournament, and we were like kind of becoming friendly with each other. And I was really, really sad when I saw that it was Sohybe that I was going to be playing in that round, because we were both 6-2, and it was like one of us knocks the other one out. And Sohybe had like the same Kyogre, like general Kyogre team comp of Kyogre, Grimmsnarl, Grass type, Incineroar, and Zacian. And it was very much like, I was like, okay, I prepped this, but Sohybe's very, very good at this game, and I was really scared about it. And I was just able to, and it like, it was just kind of like a very like a serious match, or like kind of a not very exciting one, just because you become friends with someone you don't want to win because it means they're going to not succeed, but you also don't want to not succeed yourself. But it was a really fun back and forth, and I like got a lucky turn that allowed me to like kind of win the game. And he was just like complete, like he like at the time he just kind of like walked away, like we both said like GG, and it was like really quiet. And like later on he just like came up to me and he was like, hey, I just want you to know, like I'm not upset at you, like it's just kind of like, you know, tournament day, tired, like and we both promised each other to like play our final round to give each other the best resistance, and he ended up going 6-3. But it was just like a very like, I've been playing this game online this entire time. I haven't been interacting with anybody other than like our short message, but it was very much a moment of just like, it was a nice community moment. Like this guy that I become friendly with, I unfortunately like knocked him out of the chance of getting into Top Cut. He just came up to me and it was like, hey, like I just want you to know, like we're still cool. It was just kind of like a little upset, and it was just a very nice moment, and he's a super cool guy, and I was very happy about it.
Yeah, I mean, Sohaib is one of my best friends. He's one of the first people I met playing BGC back in 2017. Uh, I also had to play him in this tournament, and I gave him his second loss, and so he was always playing. He was always playing the last round because I needed the resistance too. But yeah, I mean, that's part of the thing about in-person tournaments that you don't get to see online. Online is so easy to get angry at your opponent when you lose, or just get tilted just because. But when because you don't get to see your opponent, you don't get to, you don't get to like realize them as a person. Whereas when you're sitting in front of them and you get to talk to them and you get to know that they have the same goals as you do, and they're genuinely nice people. It makes the tournament experience so much more enjoyable to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something that I was really grateful that I like got to finally experience like in person. And I even got to be on like the opposite end of it, because I don't know if you saw my top four match. I got quite unlucky in it. But like Stefan, who ended up winning the tournament, and I had also become friends with that. And I've had these experiences online where I've beaten someone through unlucky and they just come at me really, really aggressively, and it puts you in such a bad mood. Like it can like really get at you. And I was like, I don't want to put that energy out to anyone, especially a friend. Like I want all my friends to succeed. So I was like, it's totally fine. Don't worry. Go on, keep winning. And it was really nice to like actually be in person for this community.
Yeah, exactly. And so I guess those were all the questions that I had. Congratulations again on your
Thank
really,
you.
really impressive performance. Did you have any final words or shout outs that you wanted to give?
Definitely my friend Chase Tiki. He helps me out with all of the, like every team that I've ever had. I send it his way and I'm like, what EVs do I need to use for this? Please. I'm so bad at team building. Help me out here. And he always helps me out. He helped me prep the night before, and we actually worked together at the same place in Austin. And like he was informing all of our coworkers of how I was doing the whole time. The other shout out would be um, Gemma and Nibs, who do ATX with me, Adam as well. Like they're just my ATX VGC friends. The nicest people. I wouldn't have kept playing like throughout these years of COVID, if they weren't my friends like playing and like cheering for me the whole time. And then I feel like I can't do super well with this team without shouting out you and Colin and Raghav for coming up with the original concept and general. So thank you for that. I really liked the team that you made back in Series 8. I thought it was really good, and I wanted to keep using it.
Thank you. I mean, I'm glad that the teams that we built could continue its legacy and did so well for you. Um, but yeah, again, thank you so much for coming on the channel. I really appreciate it. And I really encourage everyone to try out this team because it is very powerful. Has a wide variety of game plans. The team really strong into the teams that you expect to face. And of course, the rental code is on screen right now. The paste will be in the description down below. Uh, so yeah, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you all later.